Hello friends, welcome to the channel. This is Top Educator Akash. Today I am back with a new video of life processes part 4, that is transportation. So let's start the transportation. In the previous part we covered nutrition, digestive system in humans, and the third part was respiration. So today I am going to revise you the entire concept of transportation within mind maps. So don't forget to subscribe my channel, and let us start the transportation system. So how does transportation takes place? Basically we need to study about plants as well as humans. So let us study about humans. What happens in humans? There is a part called heart. You might have heard about it. This part is also called, this organ is also called pumping organ. What it is called? It is called as pumping organ, right? So let's move. So transportation system is also called circulatory system in humans, and this circulatory system is composed of heart, blood vessels, lymph, and so on. These help in transportation of materials from one part of the body to other parts. This helps us to maintain the body temperature and survival of body maintenance and etc. So let us study the parts of heart first. You can observe here, this part is called aorta. What it is called? It is called aorta. What happens in aorta we will study later. First you can observe the parts. This part is called vena cava. There are basically two vena cava. One is from upper body, one is from lower body. So and this part is called right ventricle, and this part is called right atrium, and this part similarly it is called left atrium, and it is called left ventricle. So as you can observe here, these are two tube like structures passing. What are these? These are pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins. What is the function of these? We will study later. So the heart is also associated with lungs. How does the transportation takes place through lungs and all? We will study later. First you can observe the parts. Here it is vena cava. From here veins pass and it forms net like structure. These are called capillaries, and here they merge and they form again arteries that passes through heart. Similarly it reaches every organs. Here the from vena cava it is reaching capillaries, and it is forming a tube, and it is forming another tube that is called arteries. So let us study about them in deep with the excellent concept mind map. So we need to study about transportation system in humans as well as plants. So first let us study about in animals. So I am going to zoom it. So what are the parts of or components of circulatory system? Basically there are many parts of circulatory system. So let us study about them. As we have seen that there are blood vessels, lymph, heart. These are the main components of the circulatory system, right? So let us move to the first part, that is blood. So blood, what is blood? It is a fluid like structure. It is nothing but a fluid which is helpful in transportation throughout the body, which transports oxygen and other materials to different parts of the body. So we can define it like this. So similarly, what is blood composed of, right? So the blood is composed of plasma, RBC and WBC as well as platelets. So let us study about them. Plasma, what is plasma? As you have heard that blood is composed of 60% of water. about 90% is of water. That means this part is nothing but plasma. What is this part? It is nothing but plasma. What does this plasma contains? This plasma contains water, proteins, hormones, etc. And the blood contains 91 to 92% of plasma itself. So next part, that is RBC. So have you ever thought that why the blood is red in color, right? So let us study them. RBC, it is basically due to RBC, that is red blood corpuscles. How is the structure of red blood corpuscles? So they are disc shaped structure and biconcave in shape. How they are disc shaped structure, and they are spherical in shape and biconcave. That means they are little bent inside. 1 minute, I will draw the structure. Suppose it is a blood cell and here it is bent inside slightly. This is nothing but biconcave. So what is the function of RBC, right? So let us study the function of RBC. So have you ever thought that how transport of oxygen takes place in humans? We respire, but how does it reach us? Our legs, our hands, and our back, everything. It reaches through, that is RBC. So what is the function of RBC? It is helpful in transporting oxygen from lungs to all tissues and return CO2 to lungs. So what is the function of RBC? It will transport oxygen from lungs. That means when we respire, it passes through lungs, as we studied that there are alveoli in respiration part. As there are alveoli, it passes through alveoli and blood capillaries and reaches through every parts of cells through the part that is called RBC. So as we have known that there is a pigment called hemoglobin. What is the pigment called? Hemoglobin. It is a respiratory pigment. It is helpful in carrying the oxygen to every part of cells of our body. So the next part, that is WBC, it is called white blood cells. These are also called leukocytes. What is the function of WBC? These are quite colorless, and so they are helpful in protecting against diseases. That means whatever the harmful substances enter in our body, that is thrown out through WBC, white blood cells. So why blood is not white in color? Because as WBC is colorless, so when colorless fluid mixes with WBC, that is RBC, that is red in color, then we will get as red. So the blood is red in color. The next component, that is platelets. What is the function of platelets? These functions help in forming blood clots when bleeding occurs. That means whenever we get an injury, that means when we fall down and the blood flows out, there will be injury. So the part which is affected will get injured. That means the cells will rupture, and what forms there forms a clot. That clot will, after few days, we may observe a black color part. This is called clot. How does it forms? That means it will form by platelets. The clot is formed by platelets. That means it will protect the flow of blood outside. So the next part, that is helps in blood coagulation. That means helps in blood transportation, and it is present in bone marrow. and this part is also called thrombocytes. These platelets are also called thrombocytes because they are helpful in forming the blood clots, so they named it as thrombocytes. So right, we have studied the first part of trans transportation system component, that is blood. So next component, that is blood vessels. What are blood vessels? The blood vessels are the tube-like structures which carries blood to every parts of cells. So as we have studied the blood, then how it is transported? It is transported through blood vessels. So the components of blood vessels are arteries, veins, and capillaries. These are the main components of blood vessels. So let us study about them. The arteries. What are arteries? These are the blood vessels which carry oxygenated blood from heart to various organs of the body. These are usually in high pressure. That means the tubes which carry oxygenated blood, that means the oxygen content in blood, that blood is carried through arteries. So exception, there is an exception, that is pulmonary artery. What is the function of pulmonary artery? It carries deoxygenated blood from heart to lungs. So be aware of this. There may be a question of what is the exception in arteries, that is pulmonary artery. So right, it carries deoxygenated blood from heart, that means from heart to lungs. So I said that these are usually in high pressure. So if the blood passes in arteries with high pressure, then there should be a strong walled cell. So we can say that the arteries are thick walled. Now next is veins. These are the tube-like structures, the vessels that collect the deoxygenated blood from different parts of the body organs, and they pour it in heart. That means whatever the CO2 content is there in blood, that blood is passed from veins to different parts of the body, and these are finally poured in heart, and from heart it passes through lungs, then it is purified, and then it is sent again. This takes place usually in low pressure. So we can say that it happens in thin walled cells. So the thin walled cells don't require high pressure. There is also an exception, that is pulmonary vein. What is pulmonary vein? It carries oxygenated blood from lungs to heart. As we have studied pulmonary arteries, similarly pulmonary veins, its opposite is nothing but pulmonary vein. It carries oxygenated blood from lungs to heart. So let us study about the capillaries. What are capillaries? As we have studied arteries and veins, they carry oxygen and CO2. Then as we know that they are somewhat thick, somewhat long, and somewhat fat, so how does it reaches every cells, every organs? This reaches through thin cell walled capillaries. These are thin cell walled, and these transport food and oxygen. Now arteries and veins form a net called capillaries. So what are capillaries? I will explain you. So let us consider this as artery, and it has vein, right? It has artery and it has vein. So as it reaches any organs, so they will form a net, that means small tubes. Further they will form small tubes, and these tubes reaches the organs, and the deoxygenated blood is carried through veins. Now here somewhat like structure. This is called as capillaries. What it is called? It is called capillaries. So as we can define from this diagram itself that they are thin walled and they transport oxygen and receive carbon dioxide and in different exchange of materials between blood and organs. So let us study about the next part of circulatory system, that is lymph and the lymphatic vessels. What is a lymph? Lymph is nothing but a colorless fluid. It is a colorless fluid that contains WBC, plasma, proteins and platelets. You might be getting a question that what is the difference between lymph and blood, right? So blood carries the different materials to different parts of the body, but as we have studied that the capillaries are thin walled, somewhat amount of fluid that is while carrying that passes out, that leaks. So this forms lymph. This is consisting of WBC, plasma, proteins and platelets. Now what is the function of lymphatic vessels? These vessels carries extracellular fluid, that is nothing but lymph, that is filtered through capillaries. As we have studied that somewhat leakage is present in capillaries, that leakage fluid is nothing but extracellular fluid. This fluid is carried through lymphatic vessels and it is unidirectional, means it passes in one direction itself. It doesn't pass backward. There is no backward flow, and it carries fluid from tissues to heart. Whatever the tissues are present in the organs and organ systems, then it is carried through, that is lymph. Where it is carried to heart. So as you can observe here, I am explaining entire concept within one mind map. So you can download the mind map through the description. In the description I have given the link, so don't forget to download the mind map. Next concept, that is heart. This is a main component of circulatory system. What it is called, also called as, this heart is also called as pumping organ. This heart is also called as pumping organ, right? So it is also called as pumping organ. Why it is called pumping organ? So let us study about it. As we know that it is a muscular organ. What it is? It is a muscular organ which helps in pumping of blood. That means it acts as a motor for our body. That means whatever the water is there in motor, what happens? Whatever the motor will, water pass through motors, it will push forward. Similar thing happens in heart. In heart, the blood acts as a water. So what are the components of heart? There are basically four chambers in heart, right? There are four chambers in heart. So let us study about where it is located. It is located in the middle of the thoracic cavity. You might have heard that somebody says that it is somewhat it is left in humans, so but it is wrong. It is not left, it is in middle of thoracic cavity, but it is slightly bent towards left, and the weight is about 220 to 340 gram. And as we have known that there are four chambers in heart. The two superior chambers are right and left atrium, and the two lower chambers are left and right ventricles. I have shown you the structure of heart, right? I have shown you the structure of heart. This heart is divided by septum. This is also called dividing wall. This is also called dividing wall. As I have shown you the structure, you can observe here. This part is called as septum. Right, this part is called as septum, dividing wall. It divides the right and left part of the heart. So this does not allow mixing of the blood. So let us study what are the valves. So as we know that the flow of blood is unidirectional. What is the reason for it? The reason is just valves. What are valves? These are the components that prevent backward flow of blood. That means if blood passes from here, that means the valves are present here. As blood passes, it does not allow blood to flow back. That is nothing but valve. These are muscular flap-like structures. These does not allow the blood to flow back. These are basically present in heart between atrium and ventricles, and between ventricles and atriums and atriums. So these are also present in arteries and ventricles and ventricles. So what is vena cava and aorta? As we have seen these parts, right? These parts, what is the function of these parts is nothing but this aorta. First let us study about aorta. Whatever the oxygenated blood is present in the body, that is passed from aorta to heart. That means oxygenated blood is passed from heart to every part of the cells, body cells. And what are vena cava? It is nothing but the part that carries deoxygenated blood to heart from all organs in the upper body and lower body. As we have studied the structure, the vena cava from upper body and from the lower body, what is its function? Its function is that nothing but whatever the deoxygenated blood is there, it passes from vena cava from lower body and from upper body. So we have studied the parts of human system. So let us study about the transportation system in humans in deep. I am going to explain this in short period, so wait for it. First let us study about it. So as you can see here, this from here the blood passes. It is nothing but right atrium, right ventricle, and it is passed out. Similarly, it is passed in, that is right ventricle, from here passes and it is went out. So let's study the process of transportation system in humans. I have made another mind map, that is process of transportation system in humans. Don't worry, you can download this mind map also. I have provided the link in the description. Don't forget to download this mind map. So as we know that a heart is a muscular organ which is big as our fist. When we fold our hands, that is called fist, and the size of heart is about our fist, and it acts as a pumping organ, right? We studied. There are basically 4 chambers in heart. What are those? Right atrium and right ventricle, left atrium and left ventricle. So let us study about the transportation system in humans. So as you can observe here, I have brought you a animation of passage of blood in heart. As you can observe here, this is vena cava. What it is? It is vena cava. You can consider the blue part as deoxygenated blood and red part as oxygenated blood. It is aorta. What it is? Aorta. So let us study the transportation system. First in heart, how the heart functions. So let us study the process. So from the vena cava, the deoxygenated blood enters from upper body and lower body. So as you can observe here, the vena cava, and it enters through right atrium. This is nothing but right atrium. Right atrium. And here is a tricuspid valve, that is valve that prevents the backward flow of water or flow of blood. That means as blood passes through right atrium, it will not allow the blood to flow back. So the blood passes next in right ventricle. So as blood passes in right atrium, it contracts, as you can observe here, it is contracting and then relaxes. Here the right ventricle will relax and the blood passes in the right ventricle. Now through pulmonary valve. What is pulmonary valve? It is also a valve in which it prevents backward flow of water, flow of blood. As the blood passes through right ventricle, it contracts and then blood passes out through pulmonary arteries. And here the valve is present. This you can observe here muscular flaps. These are the muscular flaps and the valve present between the pulmonary arteries and right ventricle. It is called pulmonary valve. So blood passes through pulmonary arteries, and from pulmonary arteries it reaches to lungs. So what is the function of pulmonary arteries? As we have studied, it carries deoxygenated blood to lungs. It carries deoxygenated blood to lungs. Then what happens in lungs? That lungs will convert the deoxygenated blood to oxygenated. How it converts? By extracting the carbon dioxide present in blood, and it will release out carbon dioxide, and what happens? The blood is oxygenated. Now how it carries to heart? It carries again back to heart through pulmonary veins. So as you can observe here, from here the the blood passes in, and it is also called pulmonary veins. From here the blood passes in, it is left atrium, right? We have studied about it. It is left atrium, and after passing through left atrium, it will contract and the left ventricle will relax. There is a muscular flap, that is valve, present between left atrium and left ventricle. It is called bicuspid valve. No need of studying about it in deeper level. So as blood passes through left ventricle, then it contracts and it reaches aorta. What is aorta? It carries oxygenated blood to every parts of cells. So as right ventricle contracts, it passes out through aorta. Now what happens in passage of blood to every parts of cells? What happens in aorta? So aorta, what is the function of aorta? In aorta there are arteries present. What is the function of arteries? It carries oxygenated blood to different organs. It carries oxygenated blood to different organs, right? So how it carries? Through capillaries, and it receives the deoxygenated blood by veins, and then it is passed again to vena cava. So friends, we have completed the transportation system in heart. So how lungs function, right? How does lungs function? As deoxygenated blood reaches lungs, then through capillaries CO2 is carried to alveoli and let out. As the deoxygenated blood passes, assume it as a deoxygenated blood and it has capillaries, and here are alveoli. These are supplied by blood vessels. These are capillaries, and there is exchange of deoxygenated blood. So there is exchange of CO2. So CO2 enters in alveoli and it is released out, and the left it is passed in, and it is passed in the O2, that is oxygen is passed in. Then there will be the oxygenated blood. There will be oxygenated blood, and it is reached to every parts of cells. There is also a important term, that is double circulation system. What is double circulation system? As we have studied that heart is composed of mainly four parts, four chambers. So as we also know that there is a wall that divides the right and left part of the heart, that is septum. So it doesn't allow mixing of blood. So what we can say, the double circulation system, the blood that goes twice through heart during each cycle, this is known as double circulation system. That means once it passes through heart, the deoxygenated blood, and then it is oxygenated blood that is pumped to every cells of the body. That is nothing but double circulation system. You can write the double circulation system of 4 marks within this function of heart and the function of lungs and the definition of double circulation system. Now also there will be a question in the board exams, that why it is necessary to separate right side and left side of heart. So let us study about in points. First point, it doesn't allow mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, as we have studied. And what is the main function? That is, it is helpful in supply of high efficient energy and oxygen to every parts of cells. And next is, it is useful in animals that have high energy needs. That means that require high energy for maintaining the body sustenance and survival, like mammals, birds. They use constantly energy for maintaining their body temperature and different functions. So now, transportation system in humans, as we have studied. But how the heart is composed of animals? Some animals are defined in the textbook I have given, also in the mind map. It is amphibians and reptiles. How is heart in amphibians and reptiles? It is 3-chambered heart. And how it is in fishes? It is 2-chambered heart. And how the transportation system takes place in fishes? Now the blood is pumped to gills. Assume it as a fish. So as blood passes, water passes in, then it passes through gills. Then gills will absorb the oxygen and it is let out. The similar function is happening in fishes. So there is no double circulation system. So how the transportation system takes place in humans, we have studied. Now let us study about the transportation system in animals, in plants. So this session is quite going to be long, and let us start the transportation system in plants. Basically plants composes of 2 vascular tissues. What are the vascular tissues? These are the transportation parts of the plants. These are composed of phloem and xylem. So what is the function of phloem? As the we have studied that in the previous part how the respiration takes place in transportation in plants. It passes in through stomata. The air passes in stomata and reaches every part of cells. Similarly, how xylem and phloem functions in plants, the water conducting tissue is called as xylem. That means water transportation takes place through xylem. And let us study the process. This process is also called as transpiration. This process is also called as 1 minute. This process is also called as transpiration, right? So what are the components involved in transportation of water? In xylem there are basically some components called xylem tissue, vessels and tracheates that are interconnected to form continuous system of water conducting channels. That means if there is a xylem vascular tissue, that means these are composed of xylem vessels, tracheates that are interconnected. That means they that are joined together and they form continuous system, and from here the water passes. How transportation takes place? Water transportation. So as the roots absorb the water, how it absorbs? The root cells will actively take ions, and there will be a difference in concentration of ions between root and soil, and there will be a steady movement of water. And then what happens? There will be evaporation of water molecules from cells of leaf, and this creates a suctional pull of water, and it is evaporated through stomata. So I will explain this. So as we know that the transpiration process, the excess amount of water is released out. Similarly, if there is a requirement of water, then it creates a suctional pull of water and it is evaporated through stomata. So and it reaches every part of cells. There is also a food conducting tissue. Xylem is a unidirectional tissue. That means it takes place in one direction itself. In phloem, how transportation takes place in phloem? Phloem is a food conducting tissue. Phloem is a food conducting tissue, so the process is called translocation. What are the components that are transported? That are amino acids and the other raw materials and the products of photosynthesis that are delivered to fruits, roots and seeds. So finally we get the glucose and the materials from food from the phloem transportation system itself. The phloem transportation system is bidirectional. That means it takes place in upward as well as downward direction. And how it takes place? It takes place by sieve tubes and companion cells. You can write it as by sieve tubes and companion cells. The transportation takes place of phloem of food in both in upward and downward direction. And how sucrose is transferred? It is transferred into phloem using ATP. As we have studied, it is an energy currency. And so as sucrose transferred into phloem, there will be osmotic pressure created by in the plants, and this osmotic pressure will move the material to less pressure. As we have studied that there is a osmosis process. Due to this osmotic pressure, what happens that one side there will be high pressure and one side there will be less pressure, and that means the high water content and low water content. So the food materials moves from high water content to low water content. Similarly, the food is passed into every part of cells through phloem tissue, and it is bidirectional tissue. So I will show you the animation. So as you can observe here, it is a xylem tissue. Xylem vessels, these are the tracheates, and you can observe here the vessels, how water passes. It passes in through the suctional pull and it is let out by transpiration. These are the xylem vessels which are interconnected and passes out through transpiration. Next is phloem. How food reaches every parts of cells. It reaches through the companion cells sieve tubes that are interconnected and it is bidirectional tissue. You can observe here it is transpiration process. It is let out. The water molecules are let out. So as you have observed the transportation system in humans and plants, so today's session is completed with a long session with excellent mind maps. So you can download this mind maps in the link description given below. So don't forget to subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to get new notifications of new videos.